Okay, before going on and taking notes, you need to complete the next set of problems. So you're going to have to pause them and write the problems down and then solve them. So here's 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 10 and 11, 12 and 13, 14, and there's 14, and there's 15. All right, for the next 3 shapes, we're going to be taking notes, and I'm going to be showing you stuff through Sketchpad. So you can pause the video, write this down, and then we will come back and fill it out. All right, so here's our rectangle, and in our rectangle we have all of the properties of a parallelogram. So if you notice, BC and AD are congruent, BA and DC are congruent, and all 4 of our angles, which help us with our opposite angles, are congruent. But we need to focus on specific properties of a rectangle, which make it different from a rhombus and a square. So we're going to focus on the diagonals. So if you notice our diagonals CA and BD, they are congruent. So not only do they bisect each other like a parallelogram, but they also are congruent. And you can see the 4 individual pieces are also congruent. So that gives us 2 sets or 2 pairs of congruent isosceles triangles. So the top and the bottom are congruent, and the left and the right are congruent. So you can also see that these 2 angles are complementary because we have 90-degree angles in the corner. Since this is isosceles, we have base angles that are congruent, so you can solve for your vertex angle. And it doesn't matter how big or how small my rectangle gets. You can see the numbers up at the top don't change. You can try to change our angles now. And you can see they still, all the pink are the same and all the green are still the same. So if we go back and we look at our notes, the rectangle has all the same properties of a parallelogram, plus 4 right angles, diagonals that are congruent, and diagonals that form isosceles triangles. Let's take a look at our next special quadrilateral. And again, please pause the video at any time. We're going to take a look at a rhombus. So our rhombus, again, all the properties of a parallelogram. When we look at a rhombus is kind of like a square that got squished. So we have 4 sides that are congruent to one another. And if you notice the diagonals this time, clearly they're not congruent. BF is shorter than AC, but they're still being bisected. The special thing about our diagonals is that they form right angles. So we have 4 right triangles, and our diagonals also bisect our angles. So these 2 in the top are congruent, these 2 in the bottom are congruent, both the right and both the left are congruent. So if we go back to our notes, we have all the same properties of parallelograms. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. So we have all the properties of parallelograms. We have 4 congruent sides. We have diagonals that bisect the angles. Our diagonals are not only bisectors of each other, but they're perpendicular bisectors because they form right angles. And because of that, our diagonals form 4 right triangles. So we will be taking everything we know with trig and special right triangles and Pythagorean theorem and applying them to the 4 right triangles we have inside our rhombus. We also will be applying them inside the 4 big right triangles that we have in our rectangle. Okay, and then we have the ones that go this way and here. All right, let's take a look at our square. Okay, you'll have to pause this and then come back. So if we go to Sketchpad and we look at what we have here, we know all 4 sides are congruent, and we know there's 90 degrees in all the corners. And a square takes on the properties not only of the parallelogram, but of the rectangle and the rhombus together. So our diagonals, therefore, are congruent, just like in a rectangle. They are perpendicular, just like in a rhombus. And our diagonals cut our angles in half. So our angles are being bisected by our diagonals, and this gives us isosceles right triangles. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 isosceles right triangles, but we also have 4 congruent larger isosceles right triangles. If we look at that one, and we look at this one, and then we look at BAC and CDA. So we have 8 isosceles right triangles. So in our notes, they're all the same properties of a rectangle and a rhombus with 4 congruent sides, 4 right angles, diagonals that bisect the angles, diagonals that are perpendicular bisectors, and diagonals that form 4 congruent isosceles right triangles. Okay, now that you have all those notes down, you can go ahead and answer some of these problems. This is all coming from the Class Zone textbook under the e-workbook. Okay, so you can pause as you go. So problem 1 has to do with a rectangle. Problem 2 is a rectangle. Problem 3 is a rectangle. Problem 4 is a rhombus. Problem 5 is a rhombus. Problem 6 is a rhombus. Problem 7 is a rhombus. Problem 8, again, is a rhombus. And we'll skip 9. How about problem 10? Problem 11. Problem 12. Problem 13. Sorry about that. Problem 14. And lastly, problem 15. So your options for that, let me try to review. All right, there's your options for problem 15. So you can just write down all the answers for 1 through 15 if you want. If you want to go ahead and print out the e-workbook from online, you can do that as well, whatever you're most comfortable with. Here is just a little flow chart showing our quadrilaterals and their characteristics and the different types of quadrilaterals we're going to be studying if you want to put this down in your notes as well.